Welcome to the Stranger Than Fiction podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Patrick Meechan. If you like the content we've been providing, please subscribe, like, and share. Feel free to share your comments down below as well. I have a very special guest tonight, Ivan Tuttle. He's a minister. He's been on several TV shows sharing his testimony, which is an incredible testimony. And he's the author of the book, A Journey to Hell, Heaven, and Back. And Ivan, I just want to thank you for coming on the program tonight. It's a privilege to have you on.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. I've seen you sharing your testimony on some other videos and whatnot, and it's fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating. I think it's something that will challenge the listeners. It challenged me, but it also gives you comfort. There's a lot of comfort in what you're sharing as well.
Well, praise God. I'm glad.
Yeah.
So that's important.
It is. It is. Yeah, the Christian life's a battle, it really is. So the more truth we have, the more secure we are, we have answers, and it gives us more strength to endure some of the things we go through on earth,
Well, you mentioned it. The more truth we get, the better it is.
That's for sure. That is for sure.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of people spreading not truth. So
I agree. It's sad. It's kind of I think we're in the end times, and I think it's getting a little bit worse. So it's even more important to get the truth out there more now, Oh,
we're absolutely in the end times. I mean, look, the end times could be another 100 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Or it could be like what the apostles and disciples went through in another 2,000 years. Who knows?
Yeah.
But everything's,
I think
everything's fallen into place,
Yes. I think it is God's design for each person to believe that, because I think the end times started, right after Jesus ascended, but we're just way deeper into it now than they were then, Well,
to Jesus, a day is like, 1,000 years.
Yep.
And I understand what that means, from my experience. I fully understand that,
Yes. That's incredible. So
his time and our timing is just two separate things.
Yeah. And, sometimes we want an answer, and we're we don't know why it's taking so long. And that is that he has better. He knows his timing's perfect, whether we feel like it is or not. It is.
Amen. Yes.
But would you like to kind of start at the beginning of your story? I believe, you started off in life and you were raised in a Christian home, attended church and everything. Do you want to kind of start wherever you feel comfortable?
Sure. I'll start in my childhood. I had a mother that was just on fire for woman God. She was just on fire for God all her life. My dad, he took a different path, and I had a very abusive dad. He used to beat me all the time. And this is part of my story, so I don't mind sharing it. He beat me so bad that he broke all the ribs in my back with a belt. So that's how he was a big guy. He was a bricklayer. And at the time when I was a kid, I know this camera probably adds another 10 pounds. I used to be the skinniest kid in the neighborhood, but I had a mom that just loved God. And so every time the doors were open at church, I was in there, Sunday morning, Sunday night, any kind of special thing, Wednesday night. It's supposed to be prayer meeting night, but they always did some talking and had a little bit of prayer and did some things. And then once I became a teenager, I could go to the youth group on Friday nights. I was just at church. The door was open. I'm there, because I also knew that we had a heavenly Father that wasn't going to beat me, that was great. So I really enjoyed, learning about the heavenly Father as much as I could. So I had, my mom, she prayed for me 2 to 3 times a day, and I probably needed it. I was ADHD, so I couldn't sit still. Yeah. I can still remember in Morningside, Maryland, sitting there looking out the window at my class and in elementary school, Morningside Elementary School, and looking out the window, and all I wanted to do was be in the woods out there and be Daniel Boone or Davy Crockett, and have that life. And so, that's kind of what my childhood was like. And then I got old enough to where, in my teen years, and my dad had a heart attack when I was 14. Okay. And he stopped the beatings at that point in time. The beatings stopped. And of course, I stood up to him too. I mean, I was tired of it anyways. And I had to go to work. So I went to work at the NCO club at Andrews Air Force Base. I worked all the way through there. And we didn't have a whole lot of money. But all I wanted to do in life was to become a pastor or a preacher. I just thought that'd be the greatest thing in the world to do. And so I was gearing my life up for that. So I decided, man, I don't know how I can go to Bible college, but I want to go. In my last year of youth camp in West Virginia, I went, well, that's where they went, the youth camp for Assemblies of God at the time was over there. And so I went there, and some guy was telling me that there's a college up in Maine that you can go to that's absolutely free. And I went, free? How can that be? And he says, well, you can work on their farm. You know, they'll take anybody. It was called Faith School of Theology. I think it's called Faith College now.
Okay.
It's still in Maine, but it's not where it used to be at. And so I went up there, and I thought, this is great. You know, I went to college up there, and I wanted to become a pastor. And man, this is a college that was a little different. You know, it was a little different than most colleges would be. You know, they taught you everything about, you know, it's okay to operate in the spirit, which most people didn't even understand back then. But you could lay hands on people. You would expect miracles to happen. You know, those kind of things are what they had. And so I was all excited. Went there, did great, was doing really, really good. Stayed up in Maine for a whole year. I didn't come home. The following year, I came home for Christmas. I met this girl. She was working at it's called the GEM store, Government Employee Membership Store, in the Washington, D.C. area. So you can understand it was government employee membership. But my dad wasn't with the government, but he knew somebody. And because he was a bricklayer union, they allowed him to go in. He had a card for it. And so we went in there, and this girl was behind the counter, and she kind of flirted with me, and I'd never been flirted with that I know of. Had no clue what that meant, you know. And to make a long story short, I didn't go back to Bible college. You see, the thing I learned is that the devil knows exactly what it takes to pull you away.
Absolutely.
He knows exactly what it is. And he knew at that point in time. And it was that girl. And that pulled me away. I didn't go back to Bible college, thought I was in love. You know, I think 3 to 6 months later, somewhere in between there, she dumped me. And I got my heart broken. But I couldn't go back to Bible college. I already slipped up, already messed up. And I believe the lie that so many people believe all the time is that I made a mistake. I'm doomed. I'm no good. God doesn't want me anymore. And I felt defeated. And I was 19 and a half. A year and a half later, I turned 21. And by the time I turned 21, some guys took me out. I had never drank a drop, you know, until I turned 21. They took me out, got me drunk. They told me I had to drink 21 Harvey Wallbangers, you know, and I didn't even know what they were. I'm like, okay, whatever, you know. I got to like 3. That was it. And some girl was flirting with me on the dance floor, and she asked if I'd give her a ride home. Her roommate took her car, and I said, sure. So I gave her a ride. Got back to her place. She goes, hey, do you smoke pot? And I thought, well, yeah, why not? You know, I hadn't. You know? And she had something called Acapulco Gold, and we smoked it. And I got high as a kite. It was kind of hallucinated off of pot and Harvey Wallbangers. I don't suggest that combination for anybody. I don't suggest any of it for anybody. But you know, but I got really high, and I messed up my life. Went downhill from there. You know, and I mean downhill. So the girl kept telling, you know, the first girl kept telling me that, you know, hey, you got to get into sales. And I'd been in several different sales, and somebody told me to try car sales. So I did. I went into car sales, and then I found out one thing people like in the world, everybody, Christians, not, they like the truth. And I learned that if I would tell the truth to people, that people would come and buy from me. And so I was selling cars, and pretty soon, within a couple of years, I was setting records, you know, statewide. Well, not just statewide. I set U.S. records. I was selling between 30 and 35 cars a month, several months in a row. And that's more than some dealerships sell, you know. And I was doing great. I was making over $100,000 a year back in 1976, 77, 70. Well, actually 77, 78. I was doing great, man. I was making a ton of money. And but I was also enjoying drugs, you know, and I was enjoying goofing off. I was dancing. I'd learned how to dance finally. I was doing disco dance. I guess I was good because I'd ask a girl once, and the rest of the night, girls would come up and ask me to dance. And I understand that means you're okay. You know? So, you know, if they ask you to dance, you got to be all right, you know, because the rejection of myself, because I can remember when I first learned how to dance, it was pretty, you know, you get a lot of rejection, you know, hey, you want to dance? No, thanks. I saw you.
Yeah. And that is the disco era.
Oh, it was. That, you know, those platform shoes, that's the front, you know, the back was like, you know, huge heels.
Yeah.
Bell-bottom pants, all that good stuff. Anyways, so I'm living that lifestyle, and some guy was sitting in the back of the bar, and finally one day he came up to me. This is 1978. Actually, it was 1977. It was around September, and he says, hey, he says, I watched you. I know you make a lot of money. He said, how would you like to make more money? And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? And he says, look, he said, I know you do drugs. I've talked to girls that you've been with, and you know, they get drugs from you and stuff. He said, how would you like to bring drugs into the country, never have to touch it, and make tons of money off of it? And I thought, this is a great lucrative opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to do it. I invested some money in it, and they were bringing drugs in from the country of Belize. I never touched them. I just invested the money. Mm-hmm. The drugs got spread out. Now, for my own personal use, they would have a person that they called a mule, and that person would take the drugs, and they would carry the drugs and hold on to it for several weeks, and then in the middle of the night or something, drop it someplace and leave it where nobody else would even think of looking at for anything. Mm-hmm. And I'd wait a few days, and then I go by and I pick it up. And if it wasn't there, I never had to pay for it or anything, you know? Yeah. And so they just considered it a loss. Yeah. That's how much money they were bringing in. So I was having a blast. I was, you know, burning the candle at both ends. And then one night on the dance floor, I started getting a pain in my left leg, in the calf of my leg. Mm-hmm. And the pain was intense. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what this is, but man, this really hurts. Mm-hmm. And so I finally, you know, after, you know, I kept stretching my leg out thinking, this got to be like a Charlie horse or, you know, muscle spasm or something. It just wouldn't go away. Mm-hmm. And the leg was kind of felt like it was swollen or something. So about midnight that night, I decided, hey, I got to leave. Now that was rare because I'd stay till the bar closed and then some. Yeah. And to leave at midnight was just unheard of for me. And it was a ladies' night. I remember it was a Thursday night. And I left by myself, and I went home, and I tried ice in my leg. I tried heat on my leg. I tried elevating the leg. Finally, I smoked enough pot. I fell asleep. And I got up the next day, and my leg's still throbbing. As soon as I stood up, boy, it started throbbing right away. Yeah. And I'm like, man, something's wrong. And I after a few days, I think it was 3 or 4 days went by, I finally went to a doctor. And a little old Polish doctor. This is in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I lived at, by the way. I'd moved around a little. Yeah. So I lived up there, and I went in there to see this guy, and I can remember this doctor looking at me, and he says, you know, he says, I think you have thrombone phlebitis. Well, I was 26 years old. I never heard of the word thrombone. I thought he said trombone. Yeah. And, you know how a trombone slides in and out? Yeah. You know, I thought, well, maybe my leg slid out of place or something. That's what he's talking about. Yeah. And I asked him, I said, well, what's this trombone thing? And he says, no, it's thrombone. He says, it's a deep vein blood clot in your leg. He said, I think that's what you have. And I said, well, I disagree with you. I said, that's impossible. I said, old people get blood clots. I'm a young person. I'm not getting any blood clots. You're crazy, you know? Yeah. And of course, now I did have a heart disease called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Okay. And that, as I found out later in life, could be what caused my blood clot. Mm-hmm. Because it's the thickening of the muscles in the heart. Mm-hmm. They get real thick. It's kind of like a Hercules heart. It's too big and too strong. Yeah. And it doesn't have the flexibility. Like a heart's supposed to be flexible, you know, pump. But mine was like, boom, you know, just really hard to do anything. Yeah. So the blood can pull, you know. Yep. So I'm just thinking this doctor's crazy. I get up and I leave his office. I went home. I didn't last a week. I finally went to the hospital. My leg was so big, my calf, it was almost as big as my thigh, and it was purple and blue and red streaks in it. I mean, it was horrible looking. It was really bad. So I went to the hospital, walked in. They made me sit down in the wheelchair for a minute because they could see my leg. Yeah. I mean, they could see how thick the pants were tight on me, you know. Yeah. They were supposed to be bell bottoms. So, wow. So I get back there and they cut them off me. They wouldn't even let me take them off. They said, no, we're cutting them off. So they cut them off. And I'm like, thanks, you ruined a good pair of pants, And the doctor's looking at me. He says, don't even move. Don't even sit up on your own. Just lay flat.
Yeah.
He says, I think that's the worst blood clot I think I've seen. Well, they couldn't do an IVP dye on me, which that's what they have to. It's called an IVP dye, and I couldn't take it because I'm allergic to iodine. Okay. So they did something called a radioactive retrograde uptake. No nuclear medicine, basically, is what they shot into you. None of it was moving down that leg. Every now and then it'd be a little thing, and they put you on this Geiger counter and they watch you. So they said, can't move. Going in, we're admitting you in the hospital because if you move, you can die. Yeah. That blood clot must be huge. Yeah. So they put me in the hospital. I was there for about 10 days. No drugs. I did smoke. They put me in a non-smoking room, and I lit up a cigarette. So they finally put me in a smoking room. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I'm not giving those up. Y'all make me give up everything else. I'm not giving that up. So they put me in a smoking room. I sat in there, and after 10 days, the doctor finally comes in and he says, look, I think you're good to go. The swelling's way down. It's almost a normal leg now. Mm-hmm. He says, you should be good to go. Your blood is thin enough. It should be able to handle anything. You got to take these pills and got to do this, got to do that. And I'm like, okay. And so he released me, and I called some girl up and went out to the nurse's station because they didn't have cell phones. Mm-hmm. And I went through my little black book, and I finally found some girl that was home, and I said, hey, can you do me a favor and fix me something to eat and bring it over, or come over and cook for me something. Mm-hmm. So she met me over at my place. I got home around 5:00. I was in this basement apartment, and she comes in there, and we fix this food. First thing I did is smoke a joint. Mm-hmm. And she fixed some kind of burger or something and ate that. Thought, okay, this is good. And she brought some liquor. It was horrible. I took like a sip, just almost like just barely smell it, taste it, and didn't want anything to do with that. Mm-hmm. Smoked some more pot, smoked it out of the bong instead of the joint. I just had to do something. Mm-hmm. And around 9:00, I sat there and looked at this girl and I said, look, I don't feel good. I'm just going to go lay down. Mm-hmm. I said, why don't you just stay out here, watch TV or play the stereo, whatever you want to do. And I'm going to go lay down. And so she sat down and I walked into my bedroom. Now I had one of those free flotation water beds. Mm-hmm. Do you know what those are?
Oh yeah. Back in the day. I remember them.
Yeah. And mine had the 6 drawers under it on each side, solid oak, mm-hmm. Had the padded rails, Yeah. It was a nice one. And because I had this hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, I loved that bed because I had to lay on my left side at night to sleep to make sure the blood flow would be better. Mm-hmm. And that's what they taught me. Even in the hospital, they said, we wish we could do it, but you can't move. Your blood's thin enough. But I laid on my left side and I went in there and I lay down on the bed, and before my head hit the pillow, I went out. And I never do that. Mm-hmm. I mean, even to this day, I'm like fiddling around for a half hour before I fall asleep at night, Yeah. And I usually don't go to bed even to this day until 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. Especially now with as much traveling as I do.
Oh, I bet.
There's a lot of it. So I can start out in Maine where I live at and end up in Sacramento, and it takes 14, 15 hours to get there. And then you get there and you got to speak,
Yeah.
So I'm just used to it. But anyways, my head didn't even hit the pillow. And all of a sudden, I'm out. I mean, I felt really strange. But I thought I was asleep. And something came along, reached underneath me, grabbed a hold of my left wrist, and yanked me completely up out of the bed. Now, back then, I was in really good shape. I'd taken martial arts for about 14 years. Mm-hmm. So if I hit somebody, they're going to go down. Yeah. Or, they're either going to go down or I'm going to break something, one or the other. Yeah. And this big, ugly thing that grabbed a hold of me, I took it and I swung at it to hit it as hard as I could. It had zero effect on it. It had absolutely no effect on it. And this, what I'm going to tell you, all happened within like 2 to 3 seconds. It was so fast. Yeah. And I'm thinking, all right, this has got to be a bad dream. I'm going to reach over and just turn the light switch on. I reached over, my hand went right through the wall. And I'm like, uh-oh. And I turn around and I look, and there's my body laying in the bed.
Wow. I can't imagine. That had to be terrifying. The fight scenario you just described, but then realizing the hand going through the wall and then seeing your body laying there. I can't even imagine the fear right then. I can't even imagine.
It was extreme fear, because here's what happens is once you die, within like a second or two, you know everything. And when I mean that, you know more than Siri, Google, and anything else.
Yeah.
You just know everything. And I knew I was dead.
Yeah.
I knew that was a demon. I knew it was the demon of death.
Yeah.
And I knew it was taking me to hell. And then within just like a second, the next thing you know, we're in hell.
Wow. Can I ask you a question?
Oh, please.
Quick? What did the demon, the spirit of death, look like that you saw?
Well, a lot of people ask me that same question. All I can tell you is that he did have like a cape with a hood over top of him.
Yep.
His eyes were fiery red.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I couldn't see his face clearly. It was very black looking in his face.
Yeah.
But his hands were very strong and powerful. His arms were powerful, although they were small. They were thin. It wasn't a skeleton.
Yeah.
You know, but he was thin, and when he reached out and grabbed me, the strength that he had was phenomenal. I can't even begin to tell you the strength that he had, and the fear that runs through your blood, through your body, instantly.
Yeah.
When you know that you're going to hell, it is the most horrible feeling, you know. And he was grotesque looking, you know, but I couldn't see everything. I can just tell you his eyes were like fire.
Yeah.
And not like a good fire. I mean, like a strange, nasty fire. And he smelled horrible.
Yeah.
And hell smells horrible. It smells worse than sulfur and garbage mixed together, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
And so this demon's taking me and he's pulling me along, and I'm going past all these people and everybody that I go by. And as soon as I looked at them, I instantly knew everything about them. And the embarrassing part is they knew everything about me.
Yeah.
They knew all the little hidden secrets. They knew everything about my life, just like I knew about them.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, why am I in hell? I never killed anybody. I never really hurt anybody. All I did was smoke dope. Yeah, I gave people drugs, sold drugs, sort of, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking, there's no reason. I really shouldn't be in hell.
Yeah.
But there I am. Here I was once walking with the Lord. You know, I mean, spirit-filled, walking with the Lord, believing in miracles, watching miracles happen in my life, these things going on. A mother raised me just to be a fine Christian young man.
Yeah.
And I turned my back on God.
Yeah.
And I walked away, and I'm in hell. And this demon, it's so scary because he's hurting me. And the pain that you get in hell is way beyond any pain that you can get on earth in the flesh. Like, you know how you get a paper cut or a splinter in your finger? That really hurts right in that finger.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the spirit, if you get a cut on your finger, it hurts through the whole being.
Yeah.
So your whole being feels this pain. And see, in the flesh, what's really nice about the flesh, God made us really unique, because in the flesh, the pain gets so bad, we can pass out.
Yeah.
Can't do that in the spirit.
Yeah.
Your spirit has no shutoff valve. It doesn't go to sleep. Right now, the people that are around this globe that are sleeping right now, their spirit's not. Yeah. Your spirit is awake 24/7. It never goes to sleep.
Yeah.
And when you're in hell, there's no sleep, there's no day, there's no night. It's just is. It's just constant time. Yeah. Same thing in heaven. But I'm in hell, and this demon's got a hold of me, and he's hurting me. I mean, I'm in excruciating pain. Then other demons come up, and they latch on to me, and they start digging into me, start poking me with stuff, and it hurts.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at all these people, and there's like something's around them. You can't see it, but they're just dangling there. Their arms and feet are dangling, and they're like screaming because of the torture and the pain.
Yeah.
And they make fun of you. Because see, here's something people don't realize. God made us in his likeness, you know, in his image and his likeness.
Yep.
Well, the Spirit of God has feelings, much more so than we do in the flesh.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and our spirit has a lot more feelings. So our spirit, when you're in pain, it's so intense.
Yeah.
You know, and you can't black out.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at all these people, and my heart is torn up because some of these people in hell, maybe I could have changed their life. Maybe they were in hell because of me.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm looking at that, and they're looking at me, and I know all about their sin. They know all about my sin, you know, and it's horrible. It's a horrible feeling. But the worst thing about hell, the absolute worst thing, there's no hope.
Yeah.
when I say there's no hope, you see, on earth, you have hope no matter what.
Yeah.
If you were to jump out of a perfectly good airplane right now at 15,000 feet up, and the only places you can land at on earth, no matter what you did, everything on earth is just solid concrete or rock, and you're going to land on your head without a parachute, you have more hope that you're going to just stand up and walk away from that than you do when you're in hell. In other words, there's no hope.
None. Yeah.
Because if you hit your head from 15,000 feet up, you're not walking away from anything.
Is it going through your mind like, I'm here and I'm never, ever, 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 ever getting out? Like forever. I'm never getting out. There's no, because that's what I think, like, man, that would be the most hopeless, horrible feeling. There's no remedy. I mean,
you nailed it. It's hopeless. It's horrible. When you see all those people that have been there, some for thousands of years, some of them just arriving, some been there a couple of years, 100 years, whatever, they all go through the same thing. They all feel exactly the same way. There's no hope. You can't get out. You are there forever. Nobody's going to come along and pull you out, even though everybody that comes in, everybody screams, help me, help me, help me, because they don't know. They want help. They're reaching for you. They're grabbing at you. They want you to help them.
Yeah.
Because they're stuck. Look, we can't understand what forever means. If you were to take 100 million billion, that's something we can look up. I think it's like a trillion. If you were to take 1 trillion years, that's not even a second in eternity.
Yeah.
There's a figure that we can put. See, man, with our finite minds, we have to put something in numbers for us to understand. So let's use 1 trillion years.
Yeah.
You're not getting out. You're still there. You don't get used to it. See, the thing about the spirit's not like the flesh. Like the flesh, you get pain, and eventually you get used to it, and you're like, okay, I got to live with it.
Yeah.
Spirit's not like that. The pain is so intense, you don't get used to it. You don't pass out. Yeah. It just keeps going, and you're doing this for all eternity. Now, I didn't see fire, but it was hotter than you can imagine. Hotter than Phoenix on a sunny day,
Yeah, yeah.
It was super, super hot,
Did the demons like taunt and torment you verbally and plus physically? Like, did they want to taunt you? Especially in your case, you had been saved. You had walked with God for a time. Were they talking about that, or while they're tormenting you?
Absolutely. They made so much fun of me. They laughed at me. They thought, oh yeah, you were a great Christian guy, weren't you? What did you do wrong? Oh, you idiot. They call you every name under the sun. I can't use the names.
Right. Right.
They called you everything. They made fun of you. They knew that I was walking with God, and I fell for the trap. I was such a super trap. You see that Satan sets up the trap. Satan's not omnipresent, so he's not every place all the time. Right. But his demons are. His demons are all over the place. They're not omnipresent, but for every human, there's probably 1,000 demons.
Yeah.
Of course, the other flip side of it, there's 10,000 angels for every human too.
Right. Right.
But they get all these demons out there, and they're watching everything, and they come to hell when you go there, especially if you have been a Christian on fire for God and you slip up. They can't wait till you die.
Yeah.
They can't wait. They make fun of you, and it never stops. They laugh at you. And believe me, in the spirit, that hurts worse than you can ever imagine. Sticks and stones might break my bones, but words will absolutely destroy you and kill you.
Yes.
They just will. We used to say, words won't ever hurt me. Yeah, baloney. They do.
Yeah.
They kill and destroy.
Yeah.
And they were making fun of me. They were, they brought up everything that I did for God. Oh yeah, well, how did that work for you? Yeah.
And
it was just, to them, it was hilarious that I fell for this trap.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did. I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker.
Mm-hmm.
And they were ready. This demon's getting there, and he's picking me up, and he's dragging me, and he's getting ready to put me in my final resting place, because they just put you up there, and that's where you're going to be at forever and ever and ever, and you're never going to get down. And I thought, this is it. And I can tell you that there's nothing on earth that makes you feel like that. No matter how hopeless things are on earth, you still have hope.
Yeah.
You have none then.
Yeah.
And this demon's getting ready to just grab me and pick me up and put me there. And this extremely loud voice rang out. So powerful. It said, "You must let him go. It's not his time." I made a promise to his mother. My mother had prayed for me 2 to 3 times a day from the day I was born. At 26 and a half, I added it up. It was over 22,000 times my mother had prayed for me.
Wow.
Believe me, my mother was God-fearing, and she said, none of my children will ever go to hell.
Yeah.
All of my children are going to stay saved. They're going to be saved, and they will come. If they walk away, they'll come back, because the Bible says if you raise them in this way, they will stay, or they will return. They will do something. Yeah. She says, and she would take us and shake us and say, "You're never going to go to hell. You're going to go to heaven."
Yeah.
You know, and that was another reason why I was so disappointed that I was in hell. You know.
Yeah.
But that voice rang out and said that, and all of a sudden, this demon that was stronger than anything, that was evil and wicked and laughing and making fun of me, all of a sudden cowered down, started shaking, was so afraid, and then let go of me.
Yeah.
As soon as that demon let go of me, it's like a vacuum. I just went right out of hell. And the next thing you know, I'm at the gates of heaven, and I'm standing there. Wow. And this huge angel is there. Now, I'll tell you this. As hopeless as hell was, as bad as hell smelled, as terrible as hell was, heaven was just the opposite. Now I have this euphoric feeling come over me. Oh, I feel so good, so wonderful. Everything is beautiful. Everything smells good. The temperature was perfect.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's hard to explain. The sounds that I could hear coming out of heaven were just, beautiful. And the smell, you know.
Yeah.
And this angel greeted me and took me by the hand. And the angel says, "You're going to go into heaven with me. You have to hold my hand. You have to go with me." Mm-hmm. I thought, all right. And the angel explained things that, hey, listen, if I let go, I'm going back to hell.
Yeah.
And if I want to stay dead and don't go back to earth, I have to go back to hell.
Yeah.
But he also explained that I wasn't ready to be in heaven on my own, because I have to go back to earth and clean up.
Yeah.
Straighten some things up.
Yep.
So I'm like, hey, I'm in for whatever. You got me out of hell. I'll do whatever you want, you know?
Yeah.
So the angel took me in through the gates of heaven and started showing me around heaven. Heaven is so beautiful. I saw buildings that looked like they were just kind of like marble, white, so white, brilliant marble, like flecks of gold and diamonds and silver all mixed in it, you know, beyond what we could ever imagine on earth, you know. Right. Streets, yeah, they look like gold. I don't know. It was very soft, but it's like gold, like cushiony gold, if you can imagine that.
Yeah. Flowers
and trees and grass and mountains and everything, you know, animals, and just watching all the things, the people that were up there, the city that was there, you know, watching Jesus walk down through the city, you know, and all these people are screaming and hollering for him. And, you know, you watch him going by, and it's just beautiful, you know. And I saw where probably the most profound thing that I'll never forget in heaven was, well, for heaven itself, was all the aborted children.
Wow.
Every child that's been aborted, every child that's stillborn, every child that, you know, lost their life before their time, you know, before the age of accountability, they're all in heaven.
Yeah.
They're waiting for mom and dad.
Yeah.
You know, and the unique thing about it that I got to see, that the angel was showing me, is that whatever that mother in particular feels like her child is supposed to look like, her son or daughter, when they get to heaven, that's what they get. They either get a baby, you know, an infant, a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, whatever's in that parent's mind, you know, teenager. Yeah. And when they get there, they get to love that child. It's just kind of a unique thing, you know, even though we're not, you know, held to marriage or anything else like that. We know each other in heaven, but your children are waiting for the moms and their dads, both, you know. And I got to see that reunion. I got to see what that was like. Some people that came to heaven that had given their life to the Lord after abortions, and it was beautiful.
That's incredible.
It's one of the most incredible things that I saw. But I saw all these beautiful things, flowers, trees, the colors in heaven, you know. But then my experience was a little different, because the angel holding my hand said, "I want you to turn and look." He says, "Turn and look." And when he did, of course, I looked to my left because that's what he said, and turned and look, and I thought I was looking to the side. I wasn't holding his hand, but he says, no, turn towards me. So I turned towards him, and as soon as I did, he disappeared. He wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the earth, and in a timeline is the only way I can explain it. I saw the earth in the beginning. I saw this big ball of water, and it was in total darkness. And all of a sudden, God came down. The Spirit of God tells you that in the Bible.
Yeah.
Read it in Genesis, first chapter.
On the waters, yes.
And he came down. He didn't just hover over the water. He moved all over the water.
Yeah.
You see, what he was doing is he was preparing the water on earth unlike any water any place else in our universe.
Mm-hmm.
He was preparing it for Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
He was making Adam, he was going to make Adam and Eve to last forever.
Mm-hmm.
Why would he make them last 99 years or 999 years? That's nothing to him. To God, that's like a second. It's nothing.
Yeah.
And I mean, God liked to come down. He was making this being like him, and so he's preparing the earth. So every ounce of water that was on the earth had God's glory on it. And here's what's really weird. Every ounce of water that we have today
Mm-hmm.
was there back then.
Wow.
So every ounce of water we have today has God's glory on it, because God's glory never wears off.
Yeah.
So I tell people, your water still has glory. That's why why do you think Jesus was called the living water?
Yeah. Yep.
Why do you think water is mentioned 722 times in the Bible, more than faith, hope, prayer, Jesus, than anything else?
Wow.
It's in the first chapter, it's in the last chapter, and it's in a lot in between.
Yeah.
When you think about it, there's a lot to it. Why did we baptize in water?
Yeah.
Why did Moses separate the water? Why did Jesus walk on water?
Yeah. Yeah.
You start thinking of it because God was preparing the earth,
Yeah.
and the water is alive.
Mm-hmm.
As crazy as it sounds, there's something to it,
It sustains life.
It is. So I'm going to drink some glory.
Yeah. That's incredible. I have to say something. I hope this isn't a bad time to interject this. But,
Perfect.
I had years ago, I used to do a blog. It was called a blog talk back in the day. And I'd interviewed some people that had passed away and had gone to hell and been revived. People that had passed away and gone to heaven and been revived. You're the first one that I can remember that ever did both. But the one thing about heaven that was so phenomenal to me, this is, you think of meeting Jesus and meeting the saints, meeting all your loved ones that were saved and passed away. But when you say the animals, like, to me, it's like, I was always taught as a kid, animals don't go to heaven or whatever, and then I got pets, and I was like, they were so, special. I was always like, they have to. And so I started looking in the Bible for myself. What does the Bible say? And I started finding passages where it talks about the creatures that are in heaven, and I was like, okay, I have hope. But Dr. Gary Wood was one of the people that I had interviewed back then. And I asked him point blank, and he said, no, there's animals in heaven. I can tell you for a fact there are, and that's just the icing on the cake. I mean, that's nothing compared to all the other beautiful, glorious things that we can't really even imagine in our, finite minds. But right. God even provides that, Well,
the difference is that we're the only beings on earth that have a spirit.
Yeah.
But God has animals in heaven. Yeah. And I try to explain that to people. And I can't tell you whether there's pets in heaven, because I didn't see pets like, somebody walking around with a dog or something. But, I didn't see everything in heaven.
Right.
And so, but what I watched is I'm watching God prepare the earth. Then I watched him make Adam, out of the dirt, the dust, because there wasn't anything really going. And he's just like pulling it all together. And I watched him as he just, Adam's alive, his heart's pumping.
Yeah.
But then he breathed into his nostrils. And when he did that, Adam was like, now my spirit and my brain work together.
Yeah.
You see, back then, the brain worked at 100%. And the spirit connected with the brain, unlike today where there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
And we only have 10%. And I can explain that some other day, why we only have 10% of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All I can tell you is think about the Tower of Babel, and that should probably answer most of your questions.
Yeah.
But I watched Adam, I watched Adam as all the animals came in front of him, and he named every single animal, And like I ask people all the time, how many years do you think Adam and Eve were in the garden?
That's a good question.
Well, how long would you think?
I don't know. Honestly, that's a good guess. I know there's timelines that think that there's people that believe that the earth was created 4,000 years before Christ, something like that. I don't know, though, honestly.
Well, I'll put it to you like this, and this is really hard for some people to swallow, but, if you read the stuff in the Bible, you're going to find out what I'm going to tell you is true. Okay. It was many, 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 many years, billions with a B. Wow. And they lived in the garden, and they had children. And there was a lot of other people in the garden from them. And I'll show you why in just a moment. And so I watched this happen. The garden was beautiful. Jesus would come down in the cool of the evening, talk with Adam, with Eve, had a beautiful time. Adam and Eve were the ones that he talked to. The others saw them.
Yeah.
It was just the most gorgeous thing you've ever seen, Then I watched Eve, as a serpent for many, many years had been talking to her. Finally, one day, the serpent says, look, you're not going to die. There's more to it than what the Bible actually states. And if you look at some transcripts, you'll find there's more to it. And the thing is that Lucifer, Satan, the devil, whatever you want to call him, he's talking with Eve and he's convincing Eve that it's okay. And finally, it's like, hey, you're not going to die. Because God said if you eat from it, you'll die.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. God only said there's one fruit that they couldn't eat. One tree. That's the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
Now, the tree of life was right there. They could have eaten from it, which I'm sure they did. But once they ate from that tree, they began to die. They lost what God had given them. Yeah. They were born in the glory. They were staying in the glory. They'd never come out of the glory. The glory of God was there. God made them like him.
Yeah.
In his image and like him to last forever.
Yeah.
And Adam and Eve messed up. They both ate of that fruit. As soon as they did, their body began to decay, and that's when time began for man in that sense.
Okay.
And then he lived 900 and some odd years, Yeah. So then you got Adam that did that. But let's go to what happens. They eat the fruit. They kick him out of the garden. They put a cherubim with a flaming sword. Why? To stop two people? I mean, that's kind of overkill. Why would God need to do that, Yeah. But if there's hundreds of thousands of people or a million people, whatever, it makes more sense, So everybody had one language. Everybody had one thought. In fact, you could speak like Adam spoke to the animals. I hate to use the word telepathically because that's not really what it is, but his spirit was able to communicate with them.
Yeah.
And he was able to talk to the animals and he gave them names, so then they're kicked out of the garden. And this cherubim's there with a flaming sword. Yeah. They had Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. After Cain killed Abel, Cain gets a mark on him, and Cain's sent out. But before he's sent out, God's talking to him. He says, well, I'm going to mark you, and that's it, and I'm going to send you out. No longer are you going to be able to do this. You're going to, you can do whatever, and, things are going to be really hard for you from now on. And Cain says, well, don't send me there, because if you do, they will kill me. Who's they?
Yeah.
They are the people that were kicked out of the garden.
Yeah.
That's who they were.
Yeah.
Those are the people that were related to them. But the first generational curse happened when Adam and Eve ate from that fruit. Yeah. Now they're cursed, and the whole generational curse went all the way through.
Yeah.
Now all the rest of them were not holy bodies anymore.
Yeah.
They began to deteriorate. They began to die. They left. They were mad at Adam and Eve, very mad at them. So they distanced themselves from them. Cain and Abel were there, just outside the garden. They were working the ground. They were doing things. Cain kills Abel. Now Cain has to go out there. He doesn't want to get killed by these people.
Yeah.
because he knows once those people see that something else has happened, that they're going to be even more mad.
Yeah.
You know, and the reason why God stopped them and kicked them out of the garden as soon as they ate from that is because now he didn't want them to eat from the tree of life, because their body is decaying. If they eat from the tree of life, it won't decay anymore.
Yeah.
So he's like, no, I'm done with you. Kaput.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to this, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then you get to the city of Babel, or Tower of Babel. I mean, these are all things that I saw.
Yeah.
And, you know, God came down and he had to confuse their language, because if he didn't confuse their language, there was nothing that would ever stop man from doing whatever they wanted to do.
Yeah.
They were so more advanced than we are today. It's unreal.
Mm-hmm.
They levitated, moved, whatever. They could do it. They were superhuman beings, you know, not even, bringing in the Nephilim or anything. I'm just talking about the superhuman beings that had one thought, one mind. Nothing could stop them.
Yeah.
Well, God said, let us go down, let us, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and some other people that were in heaven, other beings in heaven, let's go down and confuse their language. Now, how do you confuse somebody's language? You take away 90% of the functioning brain that we know of. You stop the brain from communicating with the spirit. That's why we have to speak in tongues.
Yeah.
You know, so now that you've stopped all of that, you know, your spirit still tries to alert you, still tries to do things through your soul. It tries to wake you up and do things. But before, it used to communicate flawlessly with it.
Yeah.
So God came down to confuse their language. They're all standing around getting ready to work on these, build these beautiful things. And all of a sudden, boom, their language is totally confused. They don't know what they're doing. They don't even know what a hand is, you know. They don't know what anything is. And they scatter. And they go throughout all the earth. They just scatter. They don't know who to be with.
Yeah.
They didn't know how to talk. So everybody developed their language. That's how we have so many different languages on earth now.
Yeah.
Because wherever they went at, they'd pick up a rock, and one was like, rock, and another person was like, agaga.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, or funa. You know?
Yeah.
So we developed the languages, you know, and that's what happened. And that's how we have so many different languages. Of course, as time went on, we developed other languages too, but they developed all kinds of languages.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. But then I watched all of this happen. I watched Samson. Samson wasn't this great big guy that you see on all these posts. He was just an average guy.
You're super
He didn't work. Yeah, he didn't work out.
Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't get a haircut, but he didn't work out.
Yeah.
You know? And that's why so people were so many amazed. Samson could walk over, literally pick up a horse with one hand and hold it up in the air.
Yeah.
Above his head.
Yeah.
One hand.
Yeah.
And these great big muscle bound guys couldn't do that. You know, nobody could.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why they were like, okay, how can this guy do this?
Yeah.
And that's what intrigued them. That's why Delilah did everything she could to find out. Now, once they found out and she cut his hair and he lost his strength, he was just a normal, everyday person.
Yeah.
Well, they could do whatever they wanted to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, they plucked out his eyes. They did all kinds of stuff to him. And then finally, as his hair grew back, he tore down the whole temple. I mean, he tore everything down.
Yeah.
He was so strong when he got his hair back, people forgot about that.
Yeah.
You know, they imprisoned him and they forgot that. It's a little ordinary guy, you know, and he died through all of that. But it was horrible. But I watched that happen, you know.
Yeah. He's still mentioned in the Hall of Fame of Faith, I believe, also in the book of Hebrews. You know, it's one of those things. It kind of relates to your story, and it's throughout the Bible. People fall, but they're not done.
Yes.
If they choose to get up, they're not done, you know. And David was another one, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what came to me when you were talking about Samson. You know, he still completed something God had for him to do on his way out. You know,
he did. Yes.
You know,
amen. Praise God, he did. You know.
Yeah.
So I watched this. Then let's go to where Jesus was born. Jesus, when he was born, and it's not a manger like what we see. It was a stinky, dirty place. It wasn't that good.
Yeah.
It wasn't much to it. It wasn't this little wooden manger that people tried to make it look like. It almost looked like a rock with a hole in it, you know. Yeah. And that's where he was at, and that's where he was born at. There was some straw in there and everything, you know. Mm-hmm. She had him in a stable, and stables were a little different than what people think. You know, it was really different.
Yeah.
And so he was born, and then I watched as we call it the three wise men. Mm-hmm. They appeared. Now, let me explain something to you. They didn't come by themselves. They were very, very wealthy men.
Mm-hmm.
They're astronomers. They were very wealthy. They traveled with tons of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and other things. There were more than just those things that they gave Jesus.
Yeah.
But they were coming to see the King of Kings. They knew who he was.
Mm-hmm.
They're not bringing a little bag of gold and giving it to him. They had bags and bags and bags of gold, big bags of gold.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a whole caravan with them. Each one of them had their own caravan.
Yeah.
That's why nobody bothered them, because they were protected. They were guarded by their own, band of people.
Yeah.
And they came there and they paid homage. They gave them tons of gold, tons of everything. When they fled and they went to Egypt, they had everything they needed. Jesus had everything he needed. His family had everything they needed. Joseph was a carpenter, but he did specialized work when he wanted to work, and that was it.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievable. And I watched all these things happen. I just want to skip over a lot of it. I did watch Jesus as he healed people. I watched as he spoke to people. I watched him walk on water. I watched all these things. Just like it says in the Bible, there were things that aren't in the Bible that I don't discuss because I don't want people to get out there and go, oh, what about that?
Yeah. Yep.
I just don't.
Yeah.
But I watched him as they went to crucify him. I watched him as they beat him with what they call a cat of nine tails,
Yeah.
and it ripped his flesh to pieces. It was worse than that movie. What's that movie?
Passion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much worse than that. I never watched the movie. I just saw a portion of it where Jesus was being tortured. It was much worse than that.
Wow.
Yeah, much worse. I mean, he was literally ripped apart to shreds.
Wow.
And then they made him carry his cross as far as he could. And then when they get him up there, they get him on top of the hill and they put him on the cross. And he was willing to do it, but the human side of him was difficult too,
Yeah.
But he held out his arms, he held them out. And he's like, okay. And 2 Roman soldiers held his arms down. He opened his hand willingly. They took this spike that was bigger than this pin, and they took the spike and they dulled the tip of it a little bit because they didn't want to split the wood. They wanted to make sure it goes into the wood and stayed in there.
Yeah.
So if you dull the tip of it, it doesn't split the wood. I don't know why, but I'm finding out now that's why. And so they did that. And then I watched him as they pounded into his hands. And every time that hammer hit, his hand would shake and his arm would shake. And he would and the pain was intense because it was like a, I don't know. It wasn't round. It was kind of like a cut nail, if you know what that is, kind of squared off, sort of like that, but very rough and different, And they pounded that in there. And every time they pounded it about this far from the, going all the way, into his hand, so it wouldn't fall off because it was kind of a squared head.
Yeah,
it was very messed up, and make sure his hand didn't fall off. And then they did the other hand. Then they put the 2 feet together, and even a bigger spike than that. And they're pounding it through, and his feet are shaking, and slipping off a little bit because they can't pound it down there right. They hold it on there, and they're screaming at him. They're calling him names. They're making fun of him. They're spitting on him. This whole process, what they're doing to him. And they're doing all these things, and finally they get it through both feet and into the wood, and they keep pounding it, and they made that one go down to where it pushed the foot down into the other foot a little tighter, because they wanted to fall off. And he was right in front of that big hole they had. It was about 3 to 4 feet deep. And then they had rope tied around the sides of the cross, and they're pulling on that while some other guards are up behind it, and they're pushing it, and it goes up in the air, and then it slides down in the hole, and it jerks, and Jesus' body, jumps all over the place as it falls into the hole. And they take all these rocks and they put rocks down in there to secure the cross so it doesn't fall. And I'm watching all of this happening. I'm watching as the Roman soldiers are cursing at him and bidding for his clothing, and they just think it's funny, and most of the people there were just thought it was hilarious, that they're doing this to him. But there were some that were like, oh no, what do I say? I can't say anything, Yeah. There were some, they were crying. It was killing them.
Yeah.
But they wanted to watch, they wanted to see. And Jesus, the whole time, he's looking at them and he's thinking, forgive him.
Yeah.
And I watched as this happened, and it was horrible.
Yeah.
I watched when he said, "Forgive them, Father," because they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I watched as he said, "It's finished."
Mm-hmm.
On his head. That was it. I watched him as they took him down off the cross, still making fun of him. I watched the spear going through the side of him too, and nothing but water, fluid, and everything came out, and intestines were hanging out there. Just all the stuff that he went through to die, and he died not just to forgive us of our sins. And if you don't mind me bringing this up, I want to tell you why Jesus died on the cross. It was the ultimate sacrifice, so we don't have to sacrifice things anymore.
Yeah.
That we don't have to live by the law, the 600 and some rules every day you had to follow.
Yeah.
But you still had to follow rules, the ones that he said.
Yeah.
Love your neighbor as yourself. Honor your father and mother. All these things.
Yeah.
These are the rules that he set. But the one thing he did, he died for us to do something that he said in the Bible. Because if you believe in him, that your sins are forgiven, that means you believe in him, then you're going to become a disciple.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell you, I'm going to walk you through this real quick. You're going to become a disciple because it says they were disciples first before they became Christians. See, we think Christianity is we give our life to the Lord, he forgives us of our sins. Oh, we're this great Christian now, when we're not. Because to be a Christian, you have to be a disciple.
Yeah.
And because he said, make disciples of all nations, not make Christians of all nations. We got it wrong.
Yeah.
Not only did he say that, but he also said, whoever believes in me will do the things that I do and greater.
You're right. You're right.
So he died so that our sins will be forgiven and that we will do the same things that he did and greater.
Yeah.
That's why he died.
Yeah.
Not for what man has come out with religion saying, oh, he died to forgive us of our sins and blah, 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 blah. Get baptized. Oh, you're going to heaven. Mm-hmm. No, it's more than that.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be doing the Father's work, just like he did.
Yeah.
And that's what we're supposed to do. Father's work doesn't mean you sit there and go, okay, Lord, who are you going to lead to me? No, you go out, you're led to everybody.
Yeah.
Anybody that walks in front of you is a target that God put there.
Yeah.
Talk to him. Don't be afraid. Yeah. That's why he died.
Yeah.
Much more to it. So I watched this, and instead of going into it in great detail, I just wanted to get into that so people will think about it. I watched these things happen. I watched way into the future. I saw things that are coming. I wrote a lot of stuff, a lot of things that being honest, that I put in my book. I got a ton of stuff in the book, and a lot of the things that I have in that book have started to come to pass. Just like I said. Now, remember, I saw this in 1978.
Yeah.
I wrote about it in 2013. The book came out in 2014. Then it got redone when Sid Roth picked it up in Destiny Image.
Yeah.
It's a traditional publishing deal. Mm-hmm. They said you need to update some things. So I updated things. The title was changed, Journey to Hell, Heaven and Back. I talk about the things in there. It's just too much to try to mention. Yeah. In 4 hours wouldn't be enough time.
Right. And
I watched these things happen. I watched, I saw the future events. I saw big holes opening up in Russia. And when the book came out in April of 2014 and July of 2014, they started finding these strange holes opening up in Russia that nobody could ever explain.
Yeah.
Nobody, even to this day, they can't.
Yeah.
And what's really odd is that the name of that place that the Russians call it, they call it the end of the earth or the end of the world.
Wow.
So it's kind of interesting,
Yeah.
It's up inside.
I've heard some of that. And the other thing is, other people that had like the experience like you had of actually seeing heaven, God did show them things, just like what you're saying. They were shown things. They were shown the earth, and even where there were like demonic manifestations in certain stronghold areas on the earth, all kinds of things that like Dr. Gary Wood talked about. But the other thing is, you are right. The scriptures share the fundamental things that we have to know, but there is more that, you got to think how they shared their stories and wrote them on scrolls and things. They had to put the most important things down. But if you go to the book of John, it talks about after Jesus was resurrected, between the time he was resurrected and ascended into heaven, John said there were so many miracles that he did that if you wrote them all down, the whole earth couldn't contain them.
It's true.
So there's a whole bunch more that's really good stuff that we don't know yet. God reveals things to people though as well. But again, you had a very unique situation of actually, seeing hell, seeing heaven, and then being shown basically the whole plan, almost like you were shown the Bible in real life in a vision right in front of you.
Well, it was more than a vision, because see, in heaven, God can, how can I put it? There is no time in heaven. So right now is the future and is the past.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Because we can comprehend that right now is yesterday's future and tomorrow's past.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's all happening at the same time in heaven.
Yeah.
So, which is really weird,
Yeah.
In other words, I was dead for 3 hours. And if you figure a day is like 1,000 years, and you figure 3 hours in a day, that makes me approximately 44 years in heaven.
Yeah.
So somewhere around there.
In heaven's time, yeah.
Yeah.
But
so I
call it time, because it is different than what we have here on Earth.
Yes. So I did a lot of things and saw a lot of things. I saw a lot of things in the future. So many things coming, I know that the glory of God has started in the last part of 2020, like December 2020, January 2021. The Lord had me start doing some stuff when I came back, but it's just all these things happen. I saw all this stuff going on. And what's really strange is that every place that I go to speak, even though I've never been there physically, I know I'm going there, and I know that I've seen it before,
Wow.
And it's just the strangest thing, to go through this. But I watched all this, and then it came time to be sent back to Earth. And the angel explained to me that God's going to give you some gifts and then send you back to Earth. And sometimes I'll mention the gifts, sometimes I don't, but he sent me back. And when I came back, I'd been dead for 3 hours. So what happened is this girl called the ambulance people up. She dialed 0. Back then it was a dial phone. You hit the 0, just, go back. And so she called up and she talked to the operator, and they sent an ambulance out there. And they came in the room. There was 2 people. One was a little bit shorter and stockier, and the other guy, I don't think he was really taller, but he was thin. He looked taller. And I'm watching them as they come in the room, and the shorter guy comes over. He put his hand on my face. I don't know why he did that, but I guess because I look so dead. And I found out later that rigor mortis sets into the face first. That's the first place it sets in.
Okay.
So they can tell if you're really dead or not, by touching your face.
Yeah.
And he just turned around, looked at the other guy, shook his head no, and they walked out of the room. They were calling the morgue.
Yeah.
And of course, there's girls out in the living room screaming like crazy, like, he's dead. What's going on? I didn't do anything. Well, they're thinking, okay, she's saying she didn't do anything. We need to go check him out. So they came in there to check me out, make sure I wasn't bleeding or anything or shot. And when they did, they went to touch me. And before they touched me, I came back in my body. And I joke around and say, I scared them to death, scared me to life.
Yeah.
So, and I came back to life, and I got them out of there. And, eventually it took me about a half hour. It took me that long to try to stand up or talk.
Yeah.
It was very difficult to do anything.
Yeah.
I got rid of them. I immediately flushed, 3 kilos of cocaine and 5 pounds of pot. Pot does not flush, by the way. You have to wet toilet paper and put it on top of it to get pot to flush. Cocaine flushes real quick. I learned the hard way, just getting rid of the stuff. And then I sat in my little avocado green rocking chair, and I cried my eyes out all night long until about 6:30 in the morning. I just cried and cried and cried and cried. And then I got up and I went to the hospital, and I knew the doctor that was there, and I knew he had a little tiny office in downstairs part of the hospital. It was no bigger than a walk-in closet almost, but he liked going down there to do notes or something.
Yeah.
And he talked about going there first thing in the morning. So I was there waiting for him. He comes in about 7:00 in the morning, and there I am. And I say, I got to talk to you. And I kind of just told him, because I was told by the angel not to discuss anything in detail. So I said, look, I died, something happened. Something came and grabbed me, took me up. I was in hell, and I can't tell you about everything in hell, but it was horrible. And then I was sent to heaven, and I was in heaven, and I saw all these things. I saw things about the earth, and I was just going on and on about, man, I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on. can you help me? And the doctor looks at me, and he thank goodness he was a Christian man. I remember he folded his hands, he slid across his desk, put his elbows on the table, and he says, you know, he said, I'm going to tell you something. He says, I believe you. He said, your record shows that you're dead. You know, you're dead. They were pronouncing you dead when they arrived in a DOA. Yeah. They weren't going to do anything to you. You're dead.
Yeah.
You saw those things. I believe you. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that I believe that you think you saw them or, yeah, you know, whatever. I'm telling you, I believe you. He says, because I've had people that have died. I've had a few people say they witnessed something that was very hot, like hell.
Yeah.
People screaming. He said, and I've had more people tell me about heaven.
Yeah.
You know, but I've never had somebody win to both. You know?
Yeah.
And so that was it. And so I had to wait. The angel told me I couldn't talk about it until the angel or God himself spoke to me. And then August 17th of 2013, angel came in my room and spoke to me and said, I want you to write about it. Now, I don't know how to write. Remember I told you I was ADHD?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I don't know how to write. I mean, like, I can write a sentence or two.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But to sit down and write a book? Come on, you got to be kidding me.
Mm-hmm.
And I got down, I sat down, I wrote like 8 pages, thought I had something really good, had my testimony, you know, gave it to some people, and they said, well, there's no details in it. And my feelings were hurt. So I went back to my apartment and kind of cried and said, okay, God, what do you want me to do? And the Lord spoke to me and said, just write a book. I'm like, how do you write a book? Mm-hmm. You know, I didn't do good in school, Lord. You know that. You know, how do I write a book? Mm-hmm. He said, well, I gave you a great brain. You're not really ADHD. You're GEB. You have a God-enhanced brain. Now you can do it. Mm-hmm. You know, you're able to just think of more than one thing at one time, like most people can't.
Yeah, yeah.
So he said, take the paragraphs that you have and expand on it, and that's your outline, and you have a book.
Yeah.
And I'll help you because, you know, basically God's going to help me because he knows he is the author of the best-selling book ever, you know.
That's right.
So I wrote the book, it came out, and it, you know, it has hit #1 in near-death experiences before. It usually stays in the top 100, you know, which is really good for a first-time author. It's unreal.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
God has blessed it. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. I have to ask you, like, when the angel came back in 2013, what did that angel look like that came to visit you at that time?
He looked the same, except for on Earth, he glowed, like unbelievably glowed.
Okay.
I've had visits by angels since then, and they light up the whole room because they bring God's glory with them, you know?
Yeah.
And these are what I call, in my book, I talk about different angels. These are messenger angels. They're coming for a message. Okay. Except for I did have the original angel that came with me the first time. Yeah. And so it was kind of unique and kind of different. And, you know, not all angels look the same. Some angels are people, you know? Yeah. I had if you don't mind me bringing it up, I want to tell you about a quick angel encounter I had. Okay. So a few years back, I was in this McDonald's early in the morning, and I walk in there, and there's this guy sitting down here with his long, big white beard, long white hair, smelled to high heaven, had a couple of trash bags with him with all of his stuff and belongings in it, you know. Homeless guy, snot hanging out of his nose down to here in his mouth almost. Mm-hmm. It was just horrible. You know, he was crusty looking. And I went past him, and I went up and ordered some food, and I came back over, and I went to sit down in there to eat for breakfast. Mm-hmm. And it stunk so bad in there, I couldn't stand it. So I just thought, man, I'm going to go up and tell the manager, this guy's got to go. Yeah. And I got up, and I was walking to the counter to tell him that the manager has to go. And it's like the Lord hit me with an iron brick or something. He said, stop. He said, I love him just as much as I love you. Why are you kicking him out of this place? Mm-hmm. And I was so embarrassed and so humbled. Mm-hmm. I went up to this, kept going to the counter, bought, they used to have this I don't know if they still do this, a pancake meal that they have with, and you can get an egg, and they had McMuffins, and I bought McMuffin, and I bought that, and some coffee, and I got it all on. I asked them for a tray. McDonald's used to have trays back then. Some of them did. Yeah. So I got a tray, and I took it over there to that table, and I sat it down with the guy, and I said, here, I need to feed you. And the guy just looked at me and said, oh, thank you. And so we're eating, and I'm sitting there with him, and the stench was horrible, but I didn't care because I know God still loved him, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
And so all this is going on. So finally I stood up and I said, okay, I'm going to I'll dump the trash. You relax. I turned around, took like 5 steps from him, dumped the trash, turned around, he's gone.
Wow.
The bags are gone. He's gone. The smell's gone. Other people are looking at me like, what are you doing? You know, and I'm looking, I said, where'd that guy go? And he's like, what guy? The guy I was sitting there with. They go, there's nobody there. There's never been anybody. So there was a guy sitting right here. Did he go to the bathroom? You know, he's not in the bathroom. He's not outside because you can see all the windows, you know. I mean, 3 seconds, 4 seconds at the most. You can't disappear.
Yeah.
God spoke to me and said, yeah, that was an angel.
You know, years ago, just before my time, but my grandma and grandpa, Everett, that was their name. It was my mother's mom and dad. Very, very, very devout Christians. And grandma had a lot of supernatural experiences. And at one point, she had given birth to one of their children. And this is like probably during the Depression, you know. And there was a lady that was staying at the house to take care of her because she was bedridden. She was not allowed out of bed. And she had a vision one day of a man, like a tramp. He had very poor, came to the house. And she saw him. She saw this guy in this vision, plain as day. Well, the next day, the lady that was taking care of her came up and said, Mrs. Everett, there's a tramp at the door. Should I feed him? And my grandma said, always feed him. Man, it's hard to get this out, honestly. And she said, you don't know when you're entertaining angels unaware. So she goes down, makes food for the guy, hands it out the door to him. He leaves. He eats the food and leaves and everything. The lady comes back through the house, and my grandma said, did he look like this? She described him to a T. Wow. And the lady said, Mrs. Everett, you know you're not allowed out of bed. She said, I didn't get out of bed. I had a vision of him yesterday. It was an angel.
Oh, wow.
Very similar to what you just described, you know.
Wow.
And there's a lot of times I've had situations where I worked at a hospital for almost 10 years, 9 years. And I had a lot of people that I ran into that were down and out, and I felt like I'm supposed to buy them food at the restaurant that's in the hospital. And I never felt like any of them were angels, but I also knew like I was responsible because God put it on me to do it. And every time I did it, I'd say I did this I'm doing this in Jesus' name. Correct. I don't know if they even understood that, but that's what I said, and I did it because you don't know. You really don't know, you know. But
even if they're not angels, just think of this: you get to bless somebody.
Yeah,
there's nothing. See, when you bless somebody else, you get blessed twice as much.
That's right.
I'm not talking about money. I mean, money too, but it's just when you bless somebody, it's so good. The feeling that you get when you're like, many times in restaurants, I'll see like a single mom with kids struggling, you know, with trying to get the kids to sit still. Yeah. You know, I'll tell the waiter, hey, or waitress, you know, we're going to buy their meal.
Yeah.
Don't tell them that it's us, but just let them know when they go to leave that their meal's taken care of.
Yeah.
Yep. And of course, I tip them for that too, you know.
Yeah.
And I always tip the waiters and waitresses more than most people do. I do that on purpose. I don't have money to throw around, but I do have money to throw around for God.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
And so I'll do that. And so I like doing it. And yeah, you just never know. It doesn't mean that they're an angel, but you know what? Maybe you're their angel.
Exactly. And the bottom line is too, when people are struggling, sometimes they don't even care what we believe. They don't care if we believe the gospel. They don't care if we believe in Jesus if we don't care about them in the first place.
Exactly.
If you can't show compassion to somebody, why would they care what you have to say about Jesus? They're starving, or they're hungry, or they're hurting, or whatever, you know. And it's sad, but I think that's an area where the church needs to step up sometimes, you know, because that's true ministry too, you know.
It is.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned like some of the angels look like people.
Absolutely.
There's a passage where I believe it was Peter was imprisoned, and God supernaturally delivered him from prison. He went to a house where the other believers were together and they were praying. And he went to the gate, and I believe, if I'm remembering the story correctly, a young lady came to the gate. And
no, he went to the door.
Went to the door, okay.
and was pounding on the door.
Yes, and she thought it was his angel because there's no way it can be him.
Well, actually, no, she thought it was him. Okay. And she said, it's him. And they went, oh, no. The other people in the room said, oh, no, it must be his angel.
Yes.
Because he's in prison.
Yes. So is that a case that there is like an angel that could potentially look like us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there are angels that look like us.
That's what I've thought.
Unfortunately, for some angels, for me,
Me too.
Like, poor angel, poor guy, But what you have to realize too is that, I had somebody call me yesterday, a very prominent pastor call me yesterday, and he says, "Look, I was reading this passage, on of this new book that somebody wrote, and I was reading something, and I looked up, and he says, you were sitting across the table from me." And like, what are you doing here? And then he looks next to me, and a really dear friend of mine, Tony Kemp, was sitting next to me. And he was saying, well, why are you guys here? Do y'all need a ride someplace? You need a restaurant? What do you need to do? Mm-hmm. And he said, Tony and I, when he asked us that, Tony and I just turned and looked at each other, didn't say a word, turned back and looked at him, and he goes, wait a minute. I got to go get my wife. And he runs upstairs, brings his wife down, and we're gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's like, I was not asleep. You were there in the room, Yeah. Now, I don't know if it's my angel or God sometimes will translate you, transport you, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And while you're sleeping, your spirit goes. I don't believe that spirit's running all over the place. That's not what I mean.
Yeah, I know.
But sometimes God does some strange things,
Well, look at Philip. Philip was caught away after witnessing to the Ethiopian eunuch, and he was caught away after he explained the gospel. The eunuch got baptized, and then he was caught away, so he couldn't see him anymore. That's like supernaturally removed from that situation to somewhere else.
Well, even before I got on Sid Roth, I was down in Florida at a place, speaking at a church, and this couple came up to me after church. I've been praying with people and everything. They go, "Yeah, we really enjoyed you on Sid Roth." And I said, "I've never been on Sid Roth." And, "Oh yeah, you were on Sid Roth. And we saw you. Just a minute. This couple was with us. Mm-hmm. They were over at the house visiting, and we watched you on TV. And so they brought this couple over, and they go, "Oh yeah, you were on Sid Roth. We saw you. You had kind of a pinkish colored shirt on, Mm-hmm. Well, that was in February. I was on Sid Roth's show in August. August the 6th is when I went on there for the filming. And they didn't show it till November. Well, I'd forgotten a lot about what these people had said, mm-hmm. Because I got invited on a show. It was an unusual thing. It was a God setup. God set me up, and I wasn't supposed to be there. And I happened to be in his studio for somebody else, and Sid saw it and wanted me on his show. Mm-hmm. And wanted to take over the book. So that's how that happened. But anyways, I'm on his show, and I have a different shirt on and a suit and everything. And they go, "No, that doesn't work. The camera's picking up something on the suit. You got to wear something else." And I'm going, "I don't have anything else. I have the short sleeve shirt, And they, "Well, we don't like short sleeve. We'll put it on." So I put it on and said, "Wear that." It happened to be that pinkish colored shirt.
Yeah. Wow.
So go figure. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So things are happening,
Yeah.
I can't explain them. I'm not going to try.
Yeah.
After hell and heaven, I don't need to explain it. I've already been there.
I don't know if you'll have a definite answer on this, but when you have the experiences where you hear that voice in your head, that's a third person talking to you, and they're warning you, or they're telling you to do something, and you do it, and you immediately see what would have happened if you didn't. Because I've had many experiences like this over the years. Is that an angel, or would you say, or is that the Holy Spirit inside of you speaking to you?
It could be both.
Yeah.
It just depends on the situation.
Yeah.
Sometimes if it's a dire, drastic thing, and your guardian angel, if you want to call it that, is there, your angel might grab you, say something where it's almost audible. Yeah. You think you hear it. It's like, what? Mm-hmm. Where most of the time it is the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of the Lord, that is inside of you. It's in your spirit. Yeah. And your spirit is communicating with your soul, what your soul is trying to communicate with your brain, so you get that, like, okay, now I'm not supposed to do that,
Yeah.
And here's what I tell people. Have you ever been someplace where, especially for women. And you just feel like there's somebody creepy watching you,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and you stop and you turn and look and there's somebody creepy watching you.
Yeah.
Well, that's your spirit telling your soul to wake up. Hey, tell the body some creep is watching you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And to be blunt, women don't have a sixth sense. It's just that women are more sensitive than men.
Mm-hmm.
Because when God wired women, he wired them with extra electrical circuits to the brain, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that's connected to every emotion that you can imagine, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the way God did it, you know. He had spare parts left over from Adam. It's a joke. He's okay. The woman needs it, you know.
Yeah.
She's going to have to put up with him. She's going to need all the help she can get. So,
but that is interesting because you will get like times that you discern something in the spirit realm too.
absolutely.
You know, and I don't know how all that works, but I know it's a gift of the Holy Spirit. I do know that, but I don't know how it exactly works. I had a guy one time. I was in a revival years and years ago, and I was in I was going through a very bad situation at that
Right.
time. And this evangelist came and prayed over me, and it was the weirdest thing. I never had this happen before, and I don't believe I've ever had it happen since. But he prayed, and he said, and he started talking to me, and he said, "I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm talking to your spirit, man." And it was like what he started praying over me. It went deeper or something. Something changed. I can't, but I never had that happen. But I know it's legit. I know it is, because I could tell when he did it. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I've done that too to people.
Yeah.
It's been rare cases, but I've had to do things like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It kind of removes the flesh and doubt and things from the equation or something. I don't know exactly what it's doing, but it works.
Well, sometimes it's a long story, and I don't have time to do it all. But I'll tell them, just look in my eyes. And I'll just look in their eyes, and all of a sudden, people start weeping. They start crying.
Yeah.
They start realizing some things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a long story. But it's one day we'll talk again.
I hope so. Absolutely.
I'll explain that. But I probably should be taking off out of here.
I understand. Thank you so much for being on. And again, your book, A Journey to Hell, Heaven, and Back, is available at ivantuttle.com. That's IVANTUTTLE.com. To the listeners who would like to pick that up. And again, I want to thank you for being on the program tonight. Your testimony is fascinating. It's powerful. So thank you again for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've had a blast. I really have. And by the way, real quick, when the people go to my website, it takes them right to Amazon. So
okay, cool.
That way they get the book real quick.
Very good. Yes, absolutely. Very good. To the listeners, I hope you enjoyed the program tonight. We had a lot of truth shared with us tonight and a powerful testimony. I hope that sharpens you like iron sharpens iron, you know. I want to thank you for tuning in. Again, I'm your host, Patrick Meechan. I'm the author of the True Spiritual Warfare books, Nightmare in Holmes County and 225th Street, which are also available at Amazon. But I want to encourage you to pick up Ivan Tuttle's book, A Journey to Hell, Heaven, and Back, at ivantuttle.com. Until next week, good night and God bless.